Welcome back to the Crimeland channel. Today we're discussing a case that has become extremely famous and viral for all the wrong reasons. This case went viral on TikTok because a disturbing trend emerged where people were imitating the murderer Isabella Guzman, mimicking her gestures and behaviors during her trial. In these TikTok videos, people dressed like her in an orange prison jumpsuit, imitated her gestures she made in court, or copied her expressions in general. But most notably, a lot of people posted her photos, commenting on how pretty and aesthetically pleasing she was. So, you find this person attractive, therefore it's impossible for her to have committed a crime? There's this trend of people looking at photos of serial killers and saying, "Oh my God, they're too beautiful, it's not possible they did something like that." But why is that not possible? I find all of this very unsettling. So what is the real story behind this girl with such an angelic face? Why is this girl in court? I'll explain, but get ready because Isabella Guzman was not in court for a minor issue. Isabella was in court because she was charged with first-degree murder. It's not a very light matter, and Isabella's behavior in court was indeed bizarre and inappropriate. She displayed strange behaviors like smiling at the cameras and making peculiar faces. Isabella Guzman was born on June 9, 1995, in a city in Colorado called Aurora, America. Her parents are Yunmi and Robert Guzman, who divorced when Isabella was just 4 years old. Shortly after, her mother, Yunmi, remarried a man named Ryan Hoy. Isabella was an average girl, nothing special. She didn't excel at school, didn't shine for her intelligence, didn't have particular hobbies or passions, and didn't aspire to anything noteworthy in her life. But above all, she had a really troubled relationship with her parents. It seems that their family issues began when Isabella's mother decided to remarry. Isabella didn't take this well at all, leading to a series of problems between them. This is not very unusual. It's tough to accept that your mother moves on and marries another man who isn't your dad, especially after a short time. It's challenging to understand, particularly for a child, but generally, as one grows up, they become more understanding. In Isabella's case, however, the relationship between her and her mother kept deteriorating, to the point that things got so bad her mother couldn't manage her anymore and decided to place her with her ex-husband, Isabella's father, for a period. When Isabella turned 7, she lived with her dad for a short time before returning to her mother again. But despite this break, things between them didn't improve at all. Isabella continued to be very mean to her, mischievous, and unmanageable. Despite their divorce, Isabella's parents continued to work together. They shared a small office/studio and, since they didn't have much money, decided to keep the business going together, with Isabella sometimes helping them there. However, this didn't last long because Isabella didn't enjoy being there and didn't like the idea of spending her free time with her mother. Her mother didn't make enough money and, consequently, could not buy Isabella everything she wanted. So why should Isabella help her in a job she didn't even want her mother to have? Isabella always found a good reason to be angry with her mother or to hold things against her. As she grew up, this hatred towards her mother only worsened. The Guzman family was part of the Jehovah's Witnesses Church, and Yunmi's new husband was also a member. They raised Isabella as a Jehovah's Witness. But upon turning 14, she decided she wanted to leave this religion. For her mother, this was just another problem that Isabella created, another act of rebellion. It was a very religious family, and clearly, they were all upset that Isabella wanted to leave the church. She also started skipping school a lot, ultimately abandoning it just before her final graduation exam. She began to avoid her parents, especially her mother, as much as she could. She spent as little time at home as possible, and the little time she did spend was with boys. As she grew up, Isabella began to date various boys, sneaking them into her house at night, and her mother often noticed, especially since Isabella didn't put much effort into hiding it. This naturally caused fights. Her mother continually tried to set rules and limits, but Isabella completely ignored them. Everything was a good excuse for her to disrespect her mother, whom she hated so much. But don't think Isabella was only like that with her mother, she was a very angry girl. For instance, there was an incident when one of the boys she snuck into her house one night decided to break up with her. She didn't handle this well at all. The next day, this boy went to Isabella's house to retrieve some things he had left there. Isabella chased him down the street with a baseball bat, and neighbors who witnessed the scene called the police. Her behavior was spiraling out of control. She was mean to everyone, including her stepfather, who noted how much Isabella had worsened over time. Fast forward to August 2013. During that time, Isabella's stepfather indicated that arguments between her and her mother were so frequent and Isabella's rudeness had escalated to another level. During one of these fights, Isabella spat in her mother's face, which was extreme even for her. She had always been mean, mischievous, and disrespectful, but she had never gone that far. She had deteriorated so much that she seemed like a different person. Following that particular fight, her mother began to feel frightened, afraid of her own daughter. It dawned on her that she had utterly lost control over Isabella. From that moment on, Isabella even began sending threatening messages and emails to her mother. One day, in one of these threatening emails, Isabella ended with the phrase, "You will pay for this soon." Yunmi got an awful feeling and decided to call the police. She suspected that Isabella was no longer just throwing tantrums or being disrespectful as before. She felt that Isabella would act on her threats and believed her daughter had escalated to a new level. When the police arrived at Yunmi's house, there wasn't much they could do since there hadn't been any aggression, there were just those concerning emails. Yet, they decided to speak with Isabella. Apparently, they told her, "Isabella, you're an adult now, you're 18, do you realize that your mother, if she wanted, could throw you out of the house at any moment, and she isn't doing it? So, you should be grateful just for the roof over your head. Try to control yourself, try to behave better." In essence, they gave her this talk, attempting to scare her by telling her that her mother was no longer legally obliged to take care of her. However, This didn't help much because on August 28, 2013, Yeonmi's fears became reality. That morning, Yeonmi got up and went to work. When she arrived, she spoke with her ex-husband, Isabella's father, and asked for his help. She asked if he could try to talk to their daughter, to reason with her, as everything she said seemed to provoke even more anger in Isabella. The father agreed, and that day he went to Isabella's house to speak with her. Isabella put on an act of being very sorry. Her father felt that the conversation was going very well, like Isabella was understanding his point of view. She promised to behave better from that moment on. He also mentioned that during that conversation, for the first time in a long time, he saw the old Isabella again, the good person that still existed in her. He was very pleased with that talk. But of course, Isabella had only manipulated him. She agreed with him to cut the discussion short, pretending to be touched by his words. It was all an act. That same evening, when Yeonmi returned home from work, the situation unexpectedly escalated. Yeonmi returned home around 9 in the evening, went into the living room where her husband Ryan was, and asked where Isabella was. Ryan told her that she was probably in her room as always, as Isabella was always holed up there. Yeonmi then decided to take a shower, change, and relax after a long day at work. Meanwhile, Ryan stayed on the couch watching TV. While Yeonmi was in the shower, Ryan began to hear noises coming from the bathroom, followed by screams. He heard Yeonmi's cries, calling him repeatedly. Ryan rushed upstairs to see what was happening. When he arrived, the bathroom door was open, and inside were Yeonmi and Isabella. When Isabella saw Ryan, she immediately locked the bathroom door with Yeonmi inside. Ryan attempted to force the door open, yelling and pleading with Isabella to let his wife go and leave her alone. But all he could hear from inside were continued noises and the desperate screams of his wife calling for help. Ryan was on the other side of the door, completely powerless. The only thing he could do was call the police immediately. As Ryan was on the phone with the police, he noticed a pool of blood seeping under the bathroom door. At that point, his wife's screams fell silent, and those noises ceased as well. There was only silence. At one point, Isabella turned the key and opened the door. Ryan saw Isabella standing in front of him wearing a pink top and blue shorts, completely covered in blood. She still held the knife in her hand, which was also stained with blood. Slowly, Isabella walked out of the bathroom and passed by Ryan without even looking at him. Ryan recalled that Isabella had a blank stare, lost in the void, and walked very slowly. It was a truly chilling scene. As she left the bathroom, Ryan rushed inside to find his wife. Yeonmi was lying on the floor in terrible condition. Next to her was a baseball bat lying on the ground, indicating that it hadn't just been the knife used in the attack. Most of the blows had been to her face. Yeonmi was practically unrecognizable, completely mutilated. Ryan attempted to revive Yeonmi, but it was already too late. Yeonmi was clearly dead. When the police arrived, the coroner determined that Yeonmi had been struck a total of 79 times, with all the blows directed at her face and neck. 79 times. This was clearly a crime fueled by an inhuman rage. Apparently, Isabella had started assaulting her mother with the baseball bat before switching to the knife. At this point, no one knew where Isabella had gone because she was no longer in the house. She had come out of the bathroom with that blank stare and had left the house. From then on, no one had seen her again. Understandably, the police were eager to find her. They broadcast her photo on all news outlets, stating that she was an extremely dangerous person, urging the public to report any sightings and warning everyone to stay away from her, as they believed she might still have the knife. The following morning, the police received a call from someone who claimed to have found a body inside a car in a parking lot. This person said they had discovered a dead girl covered in blood inside this car. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they found that the body was actually Isabella, who was sleeping inside her car and was completely covered in her mother's blood, which likely led the caller to believe she was dead. The police woke her up and arrested her. Before taking her into custody, they brought her to the hospital because the violence with which she had killed her mother had also injured herself. In fact, while stabbing her mother, Isabella had exerted so much force that multiple times the knife slipped and she had essentially grabbed the blade. Despite her deep anger and fervor, she never stopped attacking her mother, resulting in severe cuts on her hands. After being treated for her injuries, the police arrested Isabella. They conducted an immediate psychiatric evaluation for obvious reasons, revealing that Isabella suffered from schizophrenia. It turned out she had been experiencing auditory and visual hallucinations for years and often saw things that weren't there and heard voices in her head. These voices told her that her mother was not who she claimed to be. Isabella was convinced that her mother was actually a woman named Cecilia. This Cecilia was a very evil person whom she needed to kill to save the world. I know it sounds ridiculous, but when you suffer from schizophrenia and hear these voices, it disturbs your reality. You lack the clarity to understand that this doesn't make sense. While I'm not trying to justify such a terrible act, it's important to understand that Isabella was suffering from a very serious mental disorder. The trial for Isabella began, and as we have seen at the start of this video, it's the trial itself that made this case so famous on TikTok. Isabella exhibited very strange and bizarre behavior, some might even say inappropriate, when she appeared in court. She smiled, made faces, and gestured in a way that seemed nonsensical. However, considering her psychiatric evaluation, her behavior can be understood. It appeared that Isabella was not fully aware of what was happening or the severity of her actions. She seemed somewhat childlike. The trial began with Isabella being charged with first-degree murder, and if found guilty, she faced the possibility of receiving the death penalty. But given her mental state, the defense clearly requested a plea of insanity, arguing that Isabella's mental health had significantly deteriorated at the time of the crime. Isabella had started having these hallucinations and thought her mother was actually this Cecilia. Thus, according to the defense, Isabella was not in a state of mind to understand her actions when she committed the crime. Ultimately, The verdict was not guilty by reason of insanity. Isabella was committed to a psychiatric facility for an indefinite period. At this point, she has been in this facility for about 10 years and will remain there until the doctors deem it appropriate for her to be released. In my opinion, the fact that Isabella truly suffered from a mental illness makes it even more distasteful that the song Sweet But Psycho was used in her videos, don't you think? Since being placed in this psychiatric facility, there have been no updates on Isabella's whereabouts, until 2020 when she spoke publicly for the first time. She released an online statement, a video where she shared her version of events. This was something she hadn't done even during the trial. In this statement, Isabella admitted that she was not herself during that time, that she wasn't well at all, and that she only realizes this now. However, she also shared something else. Isabella revealed that she had been a victim of abuse at home for many years and recounted that when she decided to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses church at the age of 14, the abuse had worsened even further. Now, I would never presume to come here and say that Isabella Guzman is a liar or that she's not telling the truth because I don't know her, and we can't say for certain. However, there is no evidence to support her claims, as all testimonies from her friends, family friends, and anyone who knew Isabella or her family are nearly identical. They all assert that Isabella's family was composed of good people and that Isabella had always been a very rebellious, rude, and troublesome girl. People recount that her mother, even though she didn't earn much, always tried to provide for her and that Isabella was always very ungrateful. Everyone has consistently seen things this way, and it seems that Isabella never spoke to anyone about any abuse. It appears she never mentioned any form of violence until this recent online declaration. Of course, this doesn't mean anything definitive, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a lie. It's also entirely possible that Isabella never talked about it before simply because it's not an easy topic to share with everyone, and perhaps her mental state, along with her neglected mental health issues, which had never been diagnosed, contributed to her tendency to withdraw into herself. There is, however, another aspect of this case that I want to share with you. There are many testimonies from other people who have decided to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses church, stating that it isn't easy to exit that environment. I have read that often, if you choose to abandon the church, your family is encouraged to cut ties with you, isolate you, and stop talking to you, making your life difficult in general. This can be extremely traumatic for someone trying to leave that religion. But again, there is no evidence that this happened to Isabella, especially since she claimed the abuse she suffered worsened after she left the church. It didn't imply it started then. So who knows? As it stands, Isabella is still in that institution, and it remains unclear if she will ever get out. Let me know if you have seen any of these clips on TikTok. Also, please share if you've come across comments from people who are infatuated with Isabella, claiming they would forgive her for everything. With that said, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.